Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Som TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's episode, I am going to be having a frank and pretty open conversation with a wine critic. I've been pretty harsh on wine critics, probably throughout my whole career, but definitely during Som TV and this podcast. And we get into what is the purpose of a critic and why do we still need them? And you know what? This person, aside from being one of my dear friends, Audrey Frick, who writes for jebdunnock.com, she covers Champagne, she covers Oregon, she covers most of Italy. I mean, she has a big swath and a big responsibility, and I have to say, I came out of this conversation feeling quite different. So stay tuned for that. If you are not a Som TV subscriber, we're giving 50% off right now. In the show notes for this, I'm going to put the link, and we're going to have it on social media as well. Take advantage of this. There is so much new great stuff on Som TV, including, if you listen to the podcast, you know we did a wine draft recently. We have another one right now streaming on Som TV. It's the Wine Region Draft. We also have an all-new drink-a-bottle, several closer looks where we go to Barbaresco and other places. We open up some very old Pinot. There's a lot coming and a lot there for you to explore. So go to somtv.com, subscribe. It really helps us out. Trust us. We really appreciate all of you who listen and watch. It means the world to us. All right, without further ado, Audrey Frick of jebdunnock.com talking about wine critics. Audrey, how are you?
Fabulous.
You know, this is a rare occasion where I'm talking to you professionally. Normally we're out at dinner somewhere at like Aspen Food and Wine or New York City or some random crazy night. This is like the most calm I've ever hung out with you. This is just chill.
Sipping coffee.
Sipping coffee. It's great. I really wanted to have a conversation with somebody who is open and, I don't want to say honest, but entertaining about your profession. Your profession is one that I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about. I certainly do, I think. You are a wine critic. Is that correct?
That is the title.
You are the senior editor / wine critic for jebdunnock.com. And I just have to start off with, how the hell did you become a wine critic? I want to get into some of the bullshit you deal with and what people think of in the profession, but how did you become a wine critic? Does one go to school for this? Like, how do you do this?
Well, I was just having a conversation with William Kelly about this, actually.
Oh, interesting.
But I don't know that
he's over at
many
Wine
people,
Advocate, right?
He's at the Advocate. Yep.
Okay.
So, yep, exactly. He's a really great friend now, and I consider him a friend. And I don't know that many people have a really focused path to get here. It's a really meandering way. So I get that question a lot of like, how do you become a wine critic? And I don't really know that I have quite the breakdown for that. However, how I came to it was I was a sommelier, and I worked for a gentleman named Bobby Stuckey out in Colorado for about 7 years. And I did meet Jeb, and I met Jeb there, but Jeb lives in Boulder. So he needed a sommelier to help him with pouring and opening wines and keeping him on track for large tastings he would do at his home. He's one of the few people that really still does large importer tastings and portfolio tastings in our industry. And so I always jumped at that. I would get my shift covered, pick up another shift down the later in the week. And it was a great way for me to taste a really large scope of wines. I quickly was realizing that sommeliers taste in a very narrow band, whether it's, you're working in an Italian restaurant, so you're tasting predominantly Italian wines, you might think. But every restaurant, even if you have a global list, you're not tasting the whole scope of an entire region. There's one, the general consumer is drinking what you go into Costco and get is going to be different maybe than what you have at a place like Frasca. So it was a great opportunity for me. I never had any intention of becoming a wine critic, to be honest. It was just a really great way for me to taste and learn. That's not to say that there aren't, you cover all of these people, but I did come through the court of master sommeliers. I spent more time and money on that program than I did on my actual degrees, which were in music and French horn performance. And so I came to restaurants as a necessity. It was 08, 09. And financial recession and orchestras were collapsing all over the country and the world. And so I needed a job in a restaurant. And there were several bottles of wine, and I just fell down that rabbit hole and started studying, and I found out about Bobby and Frosca, and I was like, this is a real path forward, and this is someone who takes this profession seriously. And I was like, I always had the notion of something that really bothered me when I was in restaurants was this notion that, you're working in a restaurant, but really you have something else going on, that this is really, not the end all. But I don't know. Something really rubbed me the wrong way about those kinds of statements from people.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you're doing today. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, you don't know if you're going to walk out into the street and not to be super fatalistic, but like anything could happen. Life is not guaranteed. And so if you're doing this today, you should be pretty damn proud of it. Today is what you've got. So yes, you can say you're going to do all these other things, but to me, it was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really well. So I didn't really initially have that as like, this is my path and I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, but it just kind of ended up being that. And I'm a pretty competitive person. And so with myself, and so I always was pushing forward. So anyway, fast forward, I was moving, this is in 2019. I'm from New York City, and I wanted to move back home and be closer to my family, my parents and my brother and everything. And really the goal was to be a wine director. And so I moved back to open a restaurant called One White Street with Dustin Wilson, who you're a good friend of.
I know him
Austin
well.
Johnson. Yep. So that was really my path. And then I had moved back and the pandemic started, and I was working for $20 at Verve in the meantime, like just to get to know Dustin. And Jeb hit me up one day, and I thought he was totally joking, and was like, hey, I need an Italian wine critic, nudge, nudge. And I thought he was absolutely full of it. I was like, no, what are you talking about? I've never written a sentence in my life. Like, not my strong suit, like not going to happen. That's cute. Thanks for thinking of me, boss. Like, and so I kind of blew it off for a long time, actually. And I really didn't and to your point, I think a lot of people don't really understand what a wine critic is. And I certainly didn't as a sommelier. I mean, what my takeaway was from a wine critic, from the Court of Master Sommelier's perspective, was that wine critics are the devil. Robert Parker ruined wine. Like, screw that guy.
He didn't ruin wine alone. Others did it too.
And like Parkerization. I mean, that's like part of the curriculum, right? You learn about Parkerization. So
sure.
So I had a really kind of asshole view of what the critic was, and I really didn't understand it. And I thought sommelier reigns supreme, and I very much fell into that world of like, I watched your films, and like I was like, the sommelier is going to be my path forever. No, really. I mean, it was great. It was so motivational. It was like you watch these people doing something so intensely and powerfully, and like I was like, dude, that's power. That's great. Like, that's what I want to do. You're like it's action packed on the floor every night. You never know what's going to happen. I love restaurants. So I really thought that was forever. And, frankly, I made a bad joke about it. I was out at dinner one night with some friends of mine and here in New York. And I said, and when I my last name is Frick, and when I get spicy, some of my friends call me Frico. And so
I've seen you quite spicy. I've seen you there. I've been there with you.
It's a good time, if you could get that out of me, I think we have a good time. But I was just like kind of messing around, and I was just like swirling this glass, and I was like, listen guys, I'm going to turn down this job, but like Frico points are going to be a thing from now on. And I made this bad joke to Bobby, and he gave me a swift kick in the ass and was like, don't be a hipster New Yorker. Jeb is a great guy. You don't realize what you're turning down. Life is hard. You're going to open this restaurant. You're going to take this job with Jeb and like suck it up. Like, you don't have kids. You do this. You don't realize what's happening to you right now. And so I was like, yes, sir, Uncle Bobby, sir. And so Jeb sent me a few wines, and and they happened to be Gaia. Of all things. And
he sent you like, some Gaia. Okay.
Yeah. And he was just like, write up a couple reviews. And I spent probably 6 hours reviewing 4 wines or something stupid, and they were terrible, like, notes, and I sent them over to him, and he was like, "Perfect. All right, when do you start?" And I was like,
Really?
pretty much. And I was like, oh, I had no idea what I was in for. I think, there's a lot of misconception about what is the job of critic? What are the ethics? Like, there's so many layers to this job.
Oh my God. So I want to get into this. So you fall into this profession over time. It's like you're falling down a large group of stairs. You're not just falling down once. Okay. The first thing I want to ask is, you obviously had this opinion of critics. I certainly still have a bit of that opinion of critics. I mean, I know Jancis Robinson well. I respect her enormously, but I'm very weary of people who proclaim to be able to review a wine. It's the same for me with people who review a film. It's like, if you're you got in a shitty fight with your boyfriend that morning, or, your kid's sick and you didn't get any sleep last night or something, it's so hard, I assume, to separate that stuff. My problem is, when I watch a movie, I generally love all movies. I generally love almost all wines. I freak out about everything, and I'm too manically high to be a reviewer. Because for me, it would be like, this is awesome, and I can't separate the fact that I like the dog that I met, when I tasted the wine. It's a big question, but how do you be objective in such a subjective field? How do you do that? Can you do it? Is this bullshit? How do you do it?
This is a really great question, because depends for myself. First of all, panning back to from the perspective of the sommelier and to what I do now, growing up in Bobby Stuckey hospitality finishing school, as
sure,
calls it, it's not about what you want to drink as the sommelier. It's about what the guest wants to drink, and it's about listening. And then you have this deductive tasting method of being able to understand and assess quality from a theoretically objective standpoint, right? So I very much came through that school, and it took me a really long time, and I still think I'm working on this, of the general I might like a wine, but is this a wine that's going to isn't it going to improve? What defines a great wine, right? So a great wine should be able to improve with time. It doesn't necessarily need to last forever, but it should have the ability to improve. Mm-hmm. A great wine is compelling both intellectually and pleasurably, hedonistically. You need to want to drink the wine. And so that's where, I talk to Jeb about this all the time. This notion of objectivity, it's not possible to be fully objective. But at the same time, and that's part, it depends on what publication you're looking at, too. We're a publication where Jeb always wants me to speak he wants our readers to understand what an Audrey Frick wine, 100-point wine looks like. And so it shouldn't be necessarily it's we're not blind tasting everything, the way Spectator does, for example. Understanding each publication and, is going to be very different. And that's what's kind of beautiful about it, is there are so many different voices in this universe now, where it's not just one person dictating that everyone's trying to fancy and alter their wine style to appease. There has to be an internal ethics, right? So it's judging a wine, and then yes, there's a score, right? So that took a long time for me to understand that, I love Tempier Rosé, for example. Is it a 100-point wine? No, but is it delicious? And is it I think it does have the ability to improve with time. So understanding, though, that 92 or 93 points or 94 points for a rosé is going to be an exceptional score in the relative scheme of what that wine is there to achieve, right? So I had a great question, for example, from someone, a reader of ours, our subscriber, and she was like, I don't understand, most of the scores start around 85 and go up to 100. And it seems like a narrow band. And there is that is a real issue, of score inflation. And there's good points to be had about that. But recognizing 88 points for say a Rosso di Montalcino, Actually, that's not a bad score. It's actually like, what is the purpose of that wine? It's for drinking now. It's like you want to just have something snappy and fresh and crunchy and expresses the grape, and it's been raised in like a really clean, fresh style.
But does that begs another question though? Can a Rosso di Montalcino, which is, in some cases a $24 bottle of wine, could be cheaper, could be twice that, could be in some cases much more than that, but can that be a 100-point wine then? I mean, are you already saying like, look, a rosé is just a rosé, so it can't be 100 points, or a Rosso di Montalcino can't be 100 points because it's supposed to be just simple. It's a village wine. It's easy.
Absolutely. It's like what you put on the label doesn't really, I mean, look at the Soldera, for example, isn't listed as Brunello even. So there's, what people classify their wines as. And there are people who make incredible Rosso di Montalcino that it's not just supposed to be like a fresh quaffer that has real ageability. So like I say that in the, like, maybe I personally haven't scored a Rosso di Montalcino at 100 points. I mean, I've only given, I think, one 100-point score, two maybe to Montalcino in my 3 years of covering Montalcino. But yeah, it's absolutely in the realm of possibility, for sure. And, to that end, there are rosés, for example, like Antica Terra. I cover Oregon. Her rosé is serious. That is a real serious wine. So yeah, I've given very high scores to it, so it's like they can for sure, absolutely be high scoring wines.
How do you deal with the fact that you know a lot of winemakers, these people, their kids, you've seen how hard their job is, especially like, let's say like a husband and wife team in Oregon, like my producer who's listening right now, they make wine. I could not do this part of the job, because for me, there's always an element of you want to help people or you want to be kind to them or whatever. How do you come in and evaluate cleanly? I mean, I guess it's impossible to truly do that, but Gaia's got bucket loads of money. Their wine is considered very good and it's quite expensive. So you come in there knowing that.
Right.
But how do you put them on a level playing field with a husband and wife just down the hill, making their first Barbaresco? I mean, how do you do that? Can you do that?
Right. This leads into, first of all, there's more than just a score. I can't just put a score. Like my work is pretty, there's a lot of words behind all of this. And so in an ideal world, not only is there a note, but there's a producer profile. And then there's an intro article that summarizes everything that I've experienced in my however many weeks of just tasting this one region. And so in that context, it's, there is the ability to tell the story of the mom and pop down the street that are making things with like, they've got one little hand labeler, they don't have this equipment or whatever. And so there is that possibility to tell. I mean, I cover Champagne. There's a lot of different stories in Champagne and I have to cover them all. But also it's recognizing like, that the Moets of the world are going to be a different audience than your tiny little grower that makes 3,000 bottles a year. Having the flexibility to pan out and hopefully articulate that to the reader and say like that why is this, why is something special in this way? But also like, to not rule out the big people too. I sit with Kendall Jackson every year for 2 days, and that's not a geeky cool kid wine company that, if you went down the street and asked all the sommeliers like what they think about KJ, but maybe their perspective is a little outdated too. And maybe when was the last time they tasted some of the higher end wines from in that portfolio and or in a comprehensive way. And styles change. Companies are, so it's a vast world. And I think in an ideal world, I'm here to champion them all. I think what you're getting at is the hard part when you have something that's not favorable to say, right? And, I just had this situation a few weeks back. There was a wine that I love, this producer. And I'm just going to go out and say, just as an example. And I love the wines of Tarlande in Champagne. I remember getting to this one wine of theirs that I really wanted to love it, right? I loved the aromatics. And, again, it's like, I'm not friends with them, but I do know them personally and I root for them. I think they have great farming practices. I love everything they kind of stand for and what they do. And they have a really unique sense in the world of champagne. And I really think that they're very unique in what they do. And, this one wine, I wanted to love it and I saved it for the end of the night. I was like, this is going to be the last wine I taste of the day, and I'm going to drink it. And I was so ready. That was going to be my glass of wine for the night. And I opened this wine, and the aromatics were incredible, and it was beautiful. And the current release, and it's 2011, and like the aromatics are just like layered and gorgeous and pure and deep. And then the palate, though, was so austere. It was just like sucking on a lemon. And it was really tough. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I write about this? Because it's a pretty mean wine. But here's the deal. I can be respectful of both sides. And at the end of the day, I owe it to the reader and to the consumer. I work for the consumer. In this day and age, if you're not honest to the consumer, people will know it. And all of our work gets picked apart, and it'll come out of context, and it'll be on the Twitter universes, the wine berserkers, the XYZs, taken out of context and ripped apart if you're not honest. And so if I give this wine a really high score, and I'm like, and I just don't say that it was the way I experienced the wine, someone's going to call out my bullshit. And I never know, I mean, I think I even looked, and I was looking to try to find some info about the wine, and what came, I got pulled up to a Zacky's thing where they quoted me, this is on Zacky's, and they have my review of last year's XYZ from Tarlant, and that's on their website. So, and which is great. I'm like, this is so weird, but it's so, and it's the same thing as a shelf talker. You never know where, I have to think about everything getting taken out of context, and hopefully the right shelf talker is on the right bottle of wine, which is also another problem. Jeb is really good about tracking that and calling it out when he catches our words getting misrepresented. But there's a way to be respectful. Just because I don't care for that wine doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going to love it. There was a period where, I remember high acid, no dosage champagnes were all the rage. And certain producers were chasing that super mean, rip your enamel off your teeth style. And,
it was just carbonated Vin Claire. It was just
dude,
it kind of was.
It's brutal, right?
Yeah.
And and that was, but we all as sommeliers were like, ooh, this is so great. And meanwhile, we're sitting there with puckered faces.
You have no gum. You have no gums left in your mouth.
No gums. Yeah. Rips everything. You're done. So there's a way to be respectful of the family. And again, I just am on it. In the review, I just was listen, I wanted to love this wine. I love the aromatics. The palate is too austere for me. And frankly, though, it's going to last. It has the structure to age. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
That's all I can do. And again, if I lie about it, or if I gloss over and I'm just a big fangirl of XYZ wines, they won't trust us anymore. Then what's the point of subscribing? On that level, that's how I get to sleep at night.
No, it's a good answer. It's a really good answer. I want to name names, but I won't. But I think there are some bad actors in your profession that are just, want a lot of attention and would like to be very important. And that sometimes I think it gets in, as an outsider, I believe it gets in the way of them doing whatever the F their actual job is supposed to be. I don't know. You probably know who I'm talking about, and I'll not name names. Yeah. But I think that you have to have this profession. You have to have somebody. And as much as, look, every single time I make a movie, you spend the whole time going, God, I hope someone reviews it. And then someone does, and you're like, God damn it, that's not what I wanted. I wanted them to review it well. But then you realize it's important. It's incredibly important. And sometimes if the reviews are very positive and sometimes very negative, it's even better for a movie or a wine, because then people go, well, man, people are really divided on this. I got to try it. Now I really got to watch it. Now I got to consume this. And so you do have to have this field, but I think that your field probably deserves to be scrutinized more often than most others, and
Sure.
often you have to be able to defend what you do every day you wake up, in my opinion. Because the minute you're not being taken to task of like, why do you get to do this? How come you're important enough? Then I think you're not. Like, if you're not able to defend that or be, I don't know, that's just my thoughts on the profession, because it seems you wield a lot of power. You do.
Now I won't be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, no.
But no.
Well, I can say this because we're friends. I mean, it's not like...
Yes, no, 100%. I think, though, from a little bit panning out to like, your overarch, yes, we are absolutely open and vulnerable to criticism. You have to have a thick skin doing this. I'm just going to say that right now.
I'm going to start reviewing critics. That's what I'm going to do.
You should.
I'm going to write
and people do. There's a whole website. I'm telling you, go on Wine Berserkers. I made a huge mistake.
Oh, don't go on Wine Berserkers. No.
One time, and like, I looked up my name and I was just like, I could not sleep at all. Like, there was a terrible review I did. It was early on. And look, I was clearly confused. It was a confusing review. I'm not going to lie. And, I didn't know how to describe the wine. And it was clear when I reread the review, clearly I was struggling with how to articulate. And look, sometimes wine's hard, right? And like, learning how to write, I challenge anyone to write a single review and how they think a critic should write a review. But remember, you have to, it's not 1 or 2 or 4 reviews. It's thousands of reviews a year. So anyway, but panning back really quickly to what we were kind of getting on. So I will defend criticism, and frankly, anyone, I'm not going to, there's a lot of things that we can argue about, like ethics and all sorts of things at other publications and anywhere. And because a lot of it is self-regulated, right? But at the end of the day, I love how people don't want to call out, they don't even want to mention Suckling's name like he's Voldemort. And it's like,
John,
dude,
producer, can we beep that name? Can we beep that?
But you know what? The wine world is really hurting right now. And
he's not Voldemort. That's not what I mean. I just think
no, not him. I'm not talking about you. No. I'm speaking broadly about a lot of things and in in the world of criticism. But I will argue that man loves wine, and he is doing more to sell wine than most anyone else right now through this hard period of time. So, as much as you can disagree with like what maybe his opinions are, maybe or XYZ, I'm open to that. But at the same time, I think us in the wine world right now have to work a little bit more together and recognize that, like, at the end of the day, it's just their opinion. Like, it's just my opinion. I get that you're saying like I have a lot of influence, but hopefully that's because I've tasted wines. There are very few people who have the ability to taste as many wines in a single region and dedicate that amount of time to really, and believe me, I overthink everything. I am not the fastest critic. I am really hard on myself. I have so much respect for anyone else. Like, I might disagree with other people, but anyone that's doing this in such a comprehensive way and dedicating so much of their time to covering a single place and being as open as they possibly can to tasting as many wines from them as possible, amen. And there's something to be said for that. Again, agree to disagree. And like, that's the beautiful part about wine. Like, frankly, if it's like being a sommelier, sometimes like finding out what you don't like in wine is more insightful and more informative to helping you find the right one. So if you don't like an Audrey Frick, like, high scoring wine, cool. Like, maybe it helped you find something you do like. And like, maybe that'll help you find a voice that you do enjoy following. And so nobody has to listen to me. Nobody has to listen to any one of us. And it's like, I want everyone it's about what you want to drink. So the same tenets hold true as a critic as they did on the sommelier floor. It's just remembering that I'm not having that one-on-one conversation with the person drinking the wine. So I have to speak both to what my role, I speak to both the high level of the geeky people out there, the people in our industry, frankly. I mean, I remember being on at One White Street when I got my allocations for, speaking of champagne, my allocations for Baresh. And they were one bottle allocations.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
And I was like, great. I'm never going to get to know what these wines are. Like, I better hope I sell one and like maybe get to taste it. So what did I do is I went on the internets and guess there was only one person who had tasted the wines, and it was Antonio Galloni. And that was the information that I had to go on. And frankly, it helped me sell those wines. And it gave me a little bit of insight into what I could possibly expect. And maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I don't, but at least it gave me some ammunition and like fuel to go out on the restaurant floor and help sell those wines. Because otherwise it was like, I'm a bad liar. Just going to say that right now. I'm not going to be able to spin bullshit on the differences between IE and Ambonnet back then by myself. Now is a different story. Now I can kind of give you like the rundown of what you might be able to expect from those places. But again, that takes years of me just being there for a month at a time, chasing as much as I possibly can. And trust me, it's like, it's not always easy or fun. It sounds, the Instagram vision of it, it's like, you're doing inventory every day. There's a spreadsheet involved. There's computer programs that I don't know how to operate. There's getting locked out of the cloud. There's so many different facets of this. So it's easy and like anything, and especially when you see people being successful, it's like, oh, I liked so-and-so until this notion of selling out. And I feel like that's maybe in our generation more than it is maybe now. I don't know.
I think so, yeah. I like to call it buying in rather than selling out.
But like, that was like seen as the worst possible thing you could do, selling out.
I remember. I remember, look, just speaking of our generation, I know this is a bit of a tangent here, but I remember like Pearl Jam wouldn't allow their music to be in like movies or shows or commercials or anything. That was the worst thing you could do, would be to do something like that if you were, a grunge band from Seattle and then all of a sudden hip hop started showing up in commercials and Nike ads, and all of a sudden it changed very quickly. That all of a sudden it was like, I don't know, the Pearl Jam still does that, or is still, but the idea of selling out is interesting. And I think it's one that thankfully you have not done. Let me ask you, because we're almost out of time here. Let me ask you, who do you read? Your boss notwithstanding. What critic do you go to and say, this is somebody I read on my own free time? I maybe even subscribe to them. Who is it that you go to? Do you have one that you can call? I read a lot.
I try to read them all, to be honest. I try to hang out with as many of them as possible. I mean, I'm in New York, so I'm pretty lucky in that either people come through town, and also I cover Sonoma, so like, I try to hang out with these people and really gain perspective on how they view criticism. I mentioned William Kelly. I mean, we have one region that we overlap in, which is Champagne. And, to be honest, I used to read his and I got so intimidated. I was like, man, like, I think I know a little bit of about Champagne, but like sometimes I would read some of his works and it was like so heady and I would be like, oh my gosh, I would get lost. So I was like, okay, there is room for other voices to talk about this, but I love his writing. And like, I think he's brilliant.
He writes about Burgundy the way like 17th century French writers write about sex. It's like wild. I mean, it is very wild to read his Burgundy writing. It's like an erotic novel.
Another person, like I read a lot of like other people who cover my regions. Eric Guido at Venice, he covers Montalcino as well. And like, I remember one time I was reading one of his and I was just, oh my gosh, I'm in a Game of Thrones novel or something. Like, what's happening here? That's a different style of writing. But I can't wait. Like, I'm having dinner with him tonight. I'm so excited to talk to him, and not about what we do necessarily, but like just hanging out with these people. I like Monica Lerner in Italy. I've learned a tremendous amount about how she scores wines. I have great admiration for her. I try to read everyone, honestly. I subscribe to Spectator. Like I had lunch with Molesworth last month or 2 months ago. Like, I really think that they're just bringing people together it's a big world. So I really believe in maintaining those connections, and all I can do is learn from them. And again, I'm new to this game a little bit, even though, a few years in, it still feels like I'm just scratching the surface.
Audrey, you're not allowed to make me like critics. This is not okay. You're not allowed to do that. No, I just want to put you on the spot for one last thing. You've tasted how many wines would you say this year, 2024?
Oh my gosh, I can actually tell you, because
would you say thousands?
I did the math. Oh yes, I've done over 4,000 wines this year. So
okay. Do you have a few you want to call out that you just are like, look, this is a wine, knock my socks off. It was really good. Maybe you can throw, your leverage of it's worth the money, actually. Because I always find, and this is a tangent I don't want to go down right now, but there always is that price thing. It's easy to go, well, this Echezo is really good. It's like, well, no shit it is. But I can't afford it. So it's
totally.
It's real easy to be like, yeah, I enjoyed driving that sports car. It's like, yeah, but okay.
Yeah.
So do you have a couple wines you would call out to
absolutely
to the people who listen to this?
You brought up the great Rosso question. Like, I mean, is it 100 points? I'm not going to go there, but someone I think that makes great Rosso is Canalicchio di Sopra in Montalcino. I think those wines can age, and they're just fabulous. And
say the name again.
They're Canalicchio di Sopra. So in Montalcino, I think that those wines they're fantastic. And again, you're right. Price is important. And I champagne is always on my mind. So, and I think a lot of people don't drink enough Blanc de Noir and really dig into that. And even just like Philippinat, Blanc de Noir, entry level Blanc de Noir is killer.
I've been lucky enough to film there in their caves and obviously meet the whole family and film with them. And their wines are great. They really are. Their wines are great. I think
that they, again, and you're talking, and again, it's not like, they make more than a few thousand bottles, and it's not like a cool kid, new producer that's going to you can't get, and is going to be $600 on a wine list. No, this is a wine you can go in Pennsylvania, probably.
Yeah.
Dare I say, some really challenging states to get wine. Like my father lives in Pennsylvania, so I know this.
It's a tough place.
I have five like Travellini. I would say I buy so much Travellini from Piedmont, and it's so affordable and it's delicious. It always wins. It's a great Thanksgiving wine. It's a great holiday wine. It's perfectly priced. I drink a lot of Travellini when I'm in Pennsylvania.
This is great. Yeah. These three wines are completely unpretentious. Great picks. I love it. Audrey, I can't thank you enough for being so honest. And I look forward to, and every time, if you have the fortune to eat or drink with this woman, you are always going to drink good stuff because she always brings great bottles of wine. So I look forward to the next time, especially your champagnes. Man, I look forward to drinking with you again. Thank you for being on the Som TV podcast, Audrey. I appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jason.
I want to thank everybody for listening. It really means a lot. If you love this podcast, please, wherever you listen to it, leave us a great review, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or, Google Play. It helps a lot. You'd be surprised how much that helps us. So go leave us a great review and hit us up on social media. If you have topics you want to hear about, you want interviews you want us to do, we really want to hear from all of you. So do that. I want to thank John Adams, our producer. I want to thank Audrey Frick from Jed Dunnick. And I want to say sorry to all the critics that I've been so mean to. I guess there is a reason for all of you. All right, everybody, be safe, and hope you have your wines picked out for the holidays. I'd love to hear what those are. So hit us up on social media. Talk soon. Bye-bye.